Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. That will help YouTube to promote my content. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those as well, and I will respond. Thank you again. It's been a while since I've done my last video. In fact, one of my subscribers messaged me to see if everything was okay because I hadn't posted any videos in a while. I'm fine. It's just summertime, so I don't get down to my shop as much as I'd like to. And also, my son just recently got married, so as a result, I've been doing some renovations at his house. One of the renovations that he did, is in the process of doing, is replacing his floors. Unfortunately, his hardwood floors had some mold to them, and they were badly worn. And unfortunately, we couldn't, we needed more because we were taking up some other flooring. We wanted to match, we were removing a wall. So we needed more and we couldn't match it. So we ended up, unfortunately, taking the flooring up. Most of it was in bad shape, but I did manage to save some. So this is just regular oak hardwood flooring. What I'm going to do with this, just for nostalgic sake for my son and his new wife, is make a bowl out of it, a segmented bowl. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pass all of this wood here through my thickness planer, which will remove the finish on the top and get rid of the textured surface on the bottom. And then we will come back and do some segmented wood. I'll show you once I get it all planed up what it looks like. So after I planed both sides down through my thickness planer, I ended up with 5/8, so that's lots of thickness. So I have 5/8. I still have to do some more milling. I'll have to cut I'll have to cut the tongue off, which will make it a little bit narrow, but it's still going to be, even after I mill it, will still be over 1.5 inches wide. So that's wide enough for my segments. And I ended up with over 40 feet, linear feet of oak wood. So that should give me lots to work with. So I'll continue to mill this up, getting rid of the tongue, straightening the other edge out as well. And then we'll come back and get ready to start segmenting. So I'll just explain a little bit what I've done. First of all, doing segmented bowls takes a long time. There's a lot of pieces to cut. Each row in my bowl has 12 segments. I did 12 segments. You can do anything, but I chose 12. So each ring has 12, and I have 11 rings plus the base. So that's 144 pieces, and this is not a lot. Some have a lot more. And when you go online, there's all kinds of resources and there's all kinds of jigs that you can make to get very, very precise glue-up joints. And it is important that you get those. What I did here this morning is I cut my first ring, and I just did it on my compound miter saw, and I'm just going to swing this over here, I apologize. So because I'm doing 12 segments, it actually turns out that it's 15 degrees, and that's just the way the math works out. And I'll have the spreadsheet that I did up with my calculations. So all I did was, my compound miter saw has a fixed stop at 15 degrees. I was pleasantly surprised. I think it's fairly accurate. I cut a stop block, set that at the length of segment that I want, that I calculated on my spreadsheet, put this piece in, and then cut each of my segments, flip it over, cut the next one. So that's the process that I've followed. I will give you a word of safety here. When you're using the compound miter saw, cut through, stop. Do not pull it back up with this piece up against the stop. You will send that flying across the room. And don't ask me how I know that. So always make sure that you stop it. So now come back here and look at what I have here for my first test ring. And you can see, and I'm just going to take the camera out for a second. You can see that it's actually, can't see it yet, find it here. It's actually fairly accurate. There's a small gap right here. Now I've not glued these, I've just set them on the table. So what I'm going to do is, I'll show you this in a minute, but I'm going to glue up individual pairs, and you can see that those gaps are tight, which they should be, because even if the angle's off, two pieces cut to the same should glue up tight. But it's a matter of when I get to the end, the gap that I have, and you can see that here, I do have a small gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 half rings, and then I'm going to sand them on the belt sander, and then they should go together fine. And we'll see that in a minute. But again, you can get jigs that are much more accurate, and for much smaller pieces that may become important, because the more segments you do, any errors that you have in the angles just get multiplied. So this should be 15 degrees and it's off by 14.8. That's 0.2 degrees, may not seem like much, but by the time you go around here 12 times, then that adds up. So you do have to be fairly precise. But again, we're just going to fine tune it on the belt sander when we're done. So now that I've got my first layer cut out, I'm ready to start assembling it. So this, I'll be honest with you, this is the time-consuming part of making segmented bowls. First thing I do is just rub each piece on sandpaper. I'm not looking to reshape at this point, just to remove any burrs, any featherings from the cuttings. And again, because when I cut it, I followed an angle. Any two pieces, no matter what angle I do, are going to fit together. It's when I go to, a little hard piece of glue there. It's when I go to put multiple pieces together that the last seam is the one I worry about. So it's just a friction fit, so I just rub it a little bit to get a good tight seam. Wipe any excess glue away. And that'll dry fairly quickly. I'm just going to put some elastics on it to hold it in place. I don't have very good ones. I should have the thick rubber ones, but this is all I have at the time. There's a good one. So I put it on a flat surface to start with, because I want to push it down and make sure that not only are the two mating seams being held together, but also that they are flat to each other. Make sure that it's flat. Although I will be passing them, most likely I'll pass them through my thickness sander, just to make sure that they are flat. So that's all you do. You're just going to continue gluing up until you get all of your segments together. And again, do them in pairs, and then when you have the pairs done, start to make the ring. I want to put a fair amount of glue on there. It is end grain that you're gluing up, so it will tend to absorb a lot of glue. So be generous, and you can just wipe it off afterwards. You can see here a very small gap here and here. So I'm just going to take this to the belt sander and we'll flatten those out. So here I am on the belt sander. I can go a little bit bigger yet. You can see my bed will allow another inch or so. But I'm just going to hold both pieces on there. Make sure that I'm holding it straight up and down so it's not tipped one way or the other. But I'll hold that up straight, sand both of those edges, and then I should have a clean mating surface. So once I have my half rings sanded, I take them over to a flat surface Apply lots of glue because it is end grain, and then glue the two halves together. Again, just rub them together, make sure you get good glue coverage. Then I clamp them together using, goes by different names. I refer to it as a worm clamp. I get one that's large enough to go around the whole piece and then attach it, which will pull everything together tight. I just make sure as I tighten it up that the piece stays flat. Then I clamp it down again to a flat surface to just make sure it hasn't twisted as I tightened it up. Once I have all my pieces glued together, I then take them over to my thickness sander. This is one I've made. You can find plans on the internet for it. It's just a drum sander that I turned a round piece on the lathe, attached some belt sandpaper onto it, and then use the lathe and pass the wood underneath. My deck for this is just two pieces of plywood with a hinge in the front. In order to adjust how much you remove each pass, I have a threaded rod in the back which I can turn, which raises the top deck, thus increasing the amount that gets sanded off each time. The drum sander provides a good flat surface so that when you go to glue all the rings together, they'll fit quite well. I use a combination of methods to glue the rings to each other. Here you can just see that I've put successive rings on and just clamp them. Uh, because of the width of them, I was able to get a clamp on the ring below it and glue each one to another. Now, if you remember the pattern that I started out with, I showed the bowl coming up here with some thin pieces here, here, and here above one of the rings called a feature ring. Now, I know this is going to cause a little bit of controversy amongst the segmenting world, but I think it goes to show you don't always need walnut and padauk and zebra wood to do nice things. So this was oak flooring, as I've already discussed, which was reclaimed. Underneath the oak flooring, or actually underneath the new floor we laid, we used MDF. And I'm actually going to use 1/8 of an inch MDF sheet that I've cut in two pieces. I'm going to glue that together, and that's going to be my feature ring. And I know there's a lot of people that say, oh, you can't use MDF, that's awful wood, it's not even wood. It's true, it's not. But I think you'll see when it's done that it actually turns out quite nice. So reserve your judgment till the end. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Here I am using a press to glue the last ring on, gluing the base onto the bottom. I can turn the headstock on my lathe, which allows me to do what's called outboard turning. It's useful for when you've got large pieces that won't fit over the bed. I designed this to be 12 inches, but what I didn't take into consideration was before I made it round, it was a bit bigger than 12 inches. So I had to turn my headstock around and at least until I got it round, until I could go over the bed again. So here I am beginning the turning process. It's round now, so you'll see here I started off with my carbide tool, working both the inside and the outside. I started at the outer edge first and then worked my way down towards the bottom. With a piece this large, sometimes it will flex, so it's best to turn the outer part, the top of the bowl first, while you still have lots of material down at the base to prevent any flexing. And you'll also see that I stop it quite frequently just to check it for thickness, to make sure that my thickness is good and to make sure that I don't have any rough spots that I need to address. A lot of times when you're doing this type of turning, you'll get tear out because you're dealing with just the way the grain is oriented. So you just have to be careful, go slow. I did find that a combination of the carbide tools and the scrapers seem to work the best. So the bowl is finished now, so I'm ready to apply the finish. So I usually like to wipe it down with some denatured alcohol. That just helps remove any sawdust that might be trapped in the grain, especially with oak where the grain is so heavy. It does tend to trap a little bit of sawdust, and the denatured alcohol just helps to clean that out. I didn't show it, but for this bowl, I finished it with spray lacquer. I put 4 or 5 coats on, sanding in between with a Brillo pad just to remove any burrs, nubs that have formed with the spray varnish, and in the end gave a nice smooth finish. Here's some photos of the finished product. Here you can see the feature ring that I added. Leave a comment at the end, just let me know what you think of it. Here's a picture of the inside of the bowl, and here's the logo, my logo that I burnt onto the bottom. I hope you enjoyed this, and please don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already so that you can see the next one.